Have you ever been out in the wilderness and felt uneasy? The woods are an easy place to relax, but Mother Nature is at oftentimes more than meets the eye. Turn off your lights, check under your bed, and relax while you can. Here are two creepy stories about the outdoors.
Number 1.
Hunting is a huge part of the culture in Hawaii, and kids often learn from a very young age how to hunt. My cousin, who is in his late 20s now and has been hunting for a good 20 years of his life, has had some strange experiences in the wilderness, but this one always stuck with me as the weirdest one. Have you ever heard of a calling spirit? I'm sure they exist out of Hawaii, but the gist is, if you're somewhere like the woods or you're alone somewhere, if you hear someone call your name, you do not answer. Bad things will happen when you answer. I'm going to write this story like how my cousin told it to me. I was around 8 years old when this happened, when I had just started going hunting. Me, my cousins, and my uncle went hunting one evening in Wailua. For the time we were done, we were about a mile away from our truck. It was about 9 p.m. and it was dark. My uncle said, "I'm going to go get my truck, you kids wait here." But my cousins wanted to go with my uncle. I said, "I'll wait right here, you guys can come get me, I'm not walking." I was so over walking. My uncle was like, "You sure you want to wait here alone?" I said, "Hell no, I'm not walking, I'll wait." So he said he would be back in half an hour with the truck. Not too long after they left, I heard something moving in the bushes. And then I heard my uncle's voice. "Hey, Kai, come on, let's go." I said, "No, I am not walking back." And then my uncle whistled. You know when you're out playing with the other kids in the neighborhood and your dad whistles for you to come inside, and you know when you hear that whistle, you better go fast? That's the kind of whistle it was, so I jumped up and started walking. My uncle was walking ahead of me. I couldn't see him in the bushes, but I could hear him because he's saying things like, "You don't want to listen, you're going to get in trouble." Then he said, "Come on, let's go down here." He wanted to go back into the bushes off the path. I knew something was wrong, though. I said, "But I thought we were going to go back to the truck." Just then, I saw headlights back in the direction we started. And then I heard my uncle's stereo blasting, the only song he ever plays when he goes hunting. I start running. I take off and something grabs my backpack. I fly my arms back and let whatever it was take my bag. I get to the truck and my uncle asks, "Where's your stuff?" I point back to where I was and say, "I was following you." My uncle turns pale and yells, "Get in the car, now." I'm bawling. I'm scared. I know I messed up. I know you never answer when someone calls, but it sounded just like my uncle. He immediately took me to my other uncle, who blessed me. To this day, when I go hunting, I never answer when anyone calls my name.
Number 2.
For a number of years, I was a camp counselor at an overnight camp in the Muskokas. I loved it more than any job I've ever had, despite the non-existent pay, annoying campers, long days, and short nights, crappy food, etc. For one, I got to tell as many scary stories as I could sputter out. There was nothing better than hanging around a dying campfire with a bunch of junior high kids who were demanding the scariest, most blood-curdling tales I knew. And I got them all. The babysitter in the eerie clown statue, the driver and the creepy gas attendant, the woman and her licking dog. You know how it is. I saved my best stories for the overnight trips we made in Algonquin Park, when days would be spent canoeing on pristine lakes, and nights would be spent around the fire, singing and making s'mores, and being as rowdy as the only people within miles could be. Once the kids had quieted down, I told them stories of a stalker in the woods with a face so horrifying it paralyzed all of its victims in fear, or the group of campers who decided to spend the night across the lake from an abandoned insane asylum. On this particular night, I'd finish up the tales once again insisting that they were entirely true, and sent the campers to their tents. It had been an exhausting day, and none of the 6 kids were in any mood to stay up later. My fellow counselor had also decided to pack in, leaving just me on a fallen log next to a dying fire. I took a deep breath of the cool, fresh pine-scented air and looked out at the lake. The partial moon reflected off the glassy water, and on the other side I could see towering cliffs going up several hundred feet. I considered whether we could canoe over, climb up a few dozen feet, and do some cliff jumping. The camp director would have my head if we did that, if he found out. Movement at the very top of the cliffs caught my eye. There was a small light bobbing along the peak. At first, I thought it was a star, but it was larger and gave off a golden glow. It slowly moved back and forth in a small arc. As I sat up and watched it, another appeared next to it, bobbing along the top of the cliff, then another, and another, and a few more. My stomach dropped into my feet. I grabbed my bag and pulled out my digital camera, then focused it on the little glowing orbs and used the zoom function. I counted them and counted them again. Oh shit. In a flash, I was up and running to the tent. Hey guys, wake up, we gotta go. There was movement in the tent, and then I had 7 confused heads looking out at me. My co-counselor were a mixture of concern and pure anger. I hate to do this, I continued, but the clouds are looking really threatening. There's a big rainstorm coming in. If we get caught in it, it's going to ruin our trip. Seriously? Laura, my co-counselor, asked. We're in the middle of the woods. Where would we go? I pulled a map and a flashlight out of my bag. There's a ranger station a few kilometers south of us. I traced the path with my finger. Thank God. We can make it there in a few hours. The campers groaned. Can't we just go in the morning? No, I shouted, my voice echoing across the lake. I lowered it. Come on, let's get packed up and go. I'll tell you a story along the way. I smiled, though I could feel my lips quivering. It's my best one. That seemed to get them going, and within 10 minutes the tents were packed up and we began our trek into the deep woods, with small flashlights our only guide. When I was confident we were moving along a steady pace, I allowed myself to relax and began to tell my favorite campfire story. Centuries before the European settlers made their way into the country, it was inhabited by the First Nations people. They had made the trip from across western Canada, following the migration patterns of large animals such as buffalo and bison. Eventually, they reached Ontario, at which point they split off into smaller groups of travelers, each searching for a section of land to call their own. Legend has it that one group consisting of about 20 men, women, and children had ventured through this very area in search of a place to call home. Though it wasn't even the end of October, the weather had made a turn for the worse, and as the group journeyed around the lake, a fierce blizzard hit. Within an hour, the group found themselves in blinding snow and below 0 temperatures. Clothes they had on them were made for the fall, not this sort of weather, and there weren't any Canada Goose jackets around back then. But they pressed on. They didn't have any other choice. Night was falling as they reached a cliff bluff, which towered over a cold, choppy lake. But there was no stopping for this group. They'd die if they didn't make it past the cliffs. But the darkness was settling in and the snow falling even harder. Visibility was almost non-existent. So one of the elders had an idea. Using the little kerosene they had left, he lit a lantern for each of the travelers and had them carry it in front of them. Not so they could see the cliffs, but they could see who was in front of them, allowing them to all follow each other across the narrow bluffs. With the strongest of the men leading the way, the group began to cross the cliffs. The freezing, wet snow soaked every bone in their body. The harsh wind chilled any exposed skin and threatened to push them right off the rock. Their path was no more than a few feet wide and would have been slippery to even the best of hiking boots, let alone hand-fashioned moccasins. Slowly, painstakingly slowly, they made their way up the cliffs, praying that whatever lay on the other side could shelter them from the intensifying storm. They were about halfway up, hundreds of feet above the lake, though it was well out of their vision. In fact, all they could see in this blinding storm was a lantern in front of them, acting as a beacon to guide their steps. If the light moved up, they moved up. If it went down, they moved down. Each of the travelers was almost in a trance, caring about nothing but the glowing orb a few feet away. For the leader, though, there was no such luxury. He moved forward blindly, feeling along the cliff with his free arm, though his skin was so numb he could barely feel anything. As the path wound back again, he made a misstep and lost his footing, just as a gust of wind blasted his back. He desperately grasped for the hold, but his frozen fingers couldn't get anything. With a terrified scream, he slipped off the cliffs and fell into the icy, black lake. The rest of the party didn't see him fall, of course. All they saw was his glowing orb dropping away from the bluff and disappearing into the darkness. There was no time to mourn. They continued on, but the storm was worsening. After another minute, one of the children, his body was unable to withstand the cold, dropped away, his lantern glowing until the choppy waters put it out. Another, having seen this, lost his balance and fell. This pattern went on until there was just 5 people left, fumbling around in the darkness, following the light in front. As hard as they tried, the cliffs were unforgiving. The remaining men fell down to 4, then 3, and 2, and then there was just one left, who legends say cursed the earth as his legs slipped and he plunged hundreds of feet down, his lantern being the last one to be extinguished. Of the 20 members who tried to overcome the cliffs, I finished, not one of them survived. They say that sometimes when the conditions are right, you can see the orbs along the cliff, symbols of the lost travelers who will never find their homes. As the story ended, leaving the campers in an eerie silence, I saw lights up ahead. A wave of relief poured over me. We picked up the pace and found the ranger station bursting with activity, with a half a dozen people running around, loading up trucks and shouting into radios. The wind was beginning to really pick up, and I heard a thunder in the distance. "Hey, you kids!" A large burly man with a full beard and mustache ran up to us. "Get in the trucks, we don't have much time." Laura and I led the kids to one of the pickup trucks. "What's going on?" I asked the man. "Didn't you hear?" Another gust of wind. "Huge storm systems are heading right for us. Already been tornadoes touchdown. We're getting everyone out of here. Let's go." We all climbed into the truck's bed. I collapsed down, feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. The ranger climbed into the front and we took off down the makeshift road. My head was spinning. It wasn't possible. "How?" Laura slid next to me, keeping her voice low. "How did you know we had to get out of there?" I looked over at her. My face felt empty of any blood. I saw the lights." "What?" No. She gasped and then called herself. "How many?" I took a deep breath. 8. She looked around at all the campers who were now lying against each other, asleep despite the bumpy road. "That's all of us. My God." I nodded and leaned against her. Laura had heard the traveler's story before, and she knew that I'd left out the tiny key bit of information. The lights were real, but they were never random. If they were shining, bobbing back and forth, swinging in a small arc, it was because they had a message, a warning. One light would shine for each person who was about to die.